If I remember correctly, it transitioned to opportunity and access, because what good is the opportunity if you don't have the access?
Right.
I think
Okay.
where
What good is
some white
opportunity?
folks who obviously decry this situation make a point, and I was pointing this out in my opening monologue, they make a point is when we transition to the argument for equal results.
Right.
Because equal results, they're like, wait a minute now. You can't give something to somebody. They got to earn it. And if folks are not earning it, and the folks that are asking for quote unquote equal results, then that was the end that they needed to attack and address this issue with the fervor that it deserved. And I don't think some of us saw that coming. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, you give an excellent historical overview. When Lyndon Baines Johnson and others crafted the policy of affirmative action, it was to address the inequities and inequalities that prevailed, the historic legacy of what came about. And he used the example himself, I believe at Howard University, in a race. It's not good enough to just simply say, okay, now you've been denied access to the race. We're going to let y'all in the race. Wait a minute, they didn't have better training facilities. They've had calisthenics. They've had the ability to have extraordinary insight from coaches and trainers and the like. You know darn well, just saying, okay, all of a sudden the barriers are removed, you ain't equal. So the demand for equal outcome and results was not simply trying to blind the process and give a leg up to African American and subsequently white women, because we know historically the legacy of white supremacy prevented the flourishing of black people, but we know affirmative action has benefited to this day mostly white people through other able people and white women. So let's not
Mostly white women, yes.
I thought that's why it was created. It was created because of white women, right?
No,
It
no,
wasn't.
no, that's not it. No.
I honestly thought that. I thought it was created because of white women.
No, but they have been a huge beneficiary of it. But no, that I don't believe it was create the intent. I don't think was for them.
The
And
intent was for minorities, and right, and
not
the
black.
women was still considered minorities. It was for blacks specifically. So how
Well,
did the
yes,
women?
no, women were in there. So it was
Yeah.
for anybody who at that time had a nationally recognized or federally recognized immutable characteristic. So being a woman is an immutable characteristic. Being black is an immutable characteristic. So
That's my first time today years old learning that immutable characteristic. Okay.
yes,
I'm so
that means
behind the
women
eight ball.
cannot change.
Okay.
It's a characteristic that you cannot change.
Okay.
And again, the issue with Dr. Dyson here is not that people are not saying that there are unequal outcomes. There are unequal outcomes. The question is, are unequal outcomes natural? Because if they're natural, then there should be a different way of viewing that than if they're unnatural. An
Right.
unnatural meaning, say they were man-made, or they are the result of a system. Well, then that is something that you may want to look at. But also the question is not just whether or not they're natural.
Is benefiting white folk even around through the back door. But my point is that outcomes are critical. When you hear conservatives say, "Oh yes, opportunity but not outcome," they're saying we're going to just pretend like the history that has prevented you from flourishing is now been taken away and you can compete. And if you don't win, that's on you. No. What we understand is we've got to rejigger the process so that we can build up the training and the opportunity to allow other people to get involved in this, right? In this process of education or in a workplace where they've been denied historic access to goods and services that white folk could take for granted. And let me say this.
Sure.
If we're going to base it on, not outcomes. The outcome was rigged. That's what the history of America is. What do you think Jim Crow is? Rigging the outcome. What do you think slavery is? Rigging the outcome. What do you think inequality in access to education and health? It's rigging the outcome.
I think that's true.
So here's my thought, and this someone should ask this to Dr. Dyson, who I definitely believe is well-meaning. I think that he believes this. Every place I've ever seen him before, he is consistent in what he talks about. So I don't doubt him. I don't believe he's not genuine. I find him to be very forthright and very consistent. But my question to that is this: when you want to rejigger the outcomes, my question to Dr. Dyson, and I wish someone would ask him, what is the difference between that and socialism?
Okay. Expound on that just a little bit.
Well, okay. So if you're going to say that we don't accept, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but we don't accept that things are not equal, that everybody doesn't have exactly the same outcome, you really only have two options. If your desire is to create equality, you can either make everybody else come up to the highest standard, so whatever is demonstrated in the society as the highest standard, then what you want to do is you can make everybody come up to the highest standard.
Mhm.
That has proven Michael Eric Dyson, Dr. Dyson, who's a student of history, to have been heretofore impossible. So what can be done was what was offered by Marx and Engels and others, which is that you can bring everybody else down to the lowest standard. Now that is achievable. And we have historical precedent of when that happened, and it was never a good outcome. So the question is, do you want to be unequal with the chance at possibly doing something and having something great or even good? Or do you want everybody to be bad and you'll feel better because nobody's better than you?
Wow. So is this God gracious? Okay. No Child Left Behind. Is
Oh,
that the
I
same?
know the names of several people that were absolutely left behind. I can send them to you if you want. I got their phone numbers and everything.
Wow. But was that a program similar to what they're trying to introduce into schools now?
No Child Left Behind was George Bush's educational program, and one of the problems with American education is that every 4 to 8 years there's a new system on how to educate. But if you go to the highest performing schools, and particularly private schools, that they do the same education for the most part that they have done for 200 years. So
Wow.
when you go to ninth grade, if your grandfather went to that school, you read the same books, they read the same classics that they had in literature for ninth grade, they still have. The
Wow.
same way that they're doing math, they're not changing education. We in this country know how to successfully educate children, and we are doing it. We're simply not doing it in the numbers that we used to do it. We used to provide a high quality education for everybody, or for at least most people. Now we are providing a very high quality education for those who can pay for it. So places where the reading is different this year than it was when your sister was in sixth grade, and it's different than when your brother was in 11th grade, that's generally places that are failing. Because people who are doing it successfully know how to do it, and they're not making any changes to it. You know why? Because it wasn't broke, so they didn't fix it.
Wash, rinse, repeat. That makes sense. That makes all the sense in the world. Okay. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. All right.
It is funny to me to hear
Uh-oh.
people who have engineered the outcome to their advantage, so much so that they didn't want Michael Jordan playing in the NBA. Earl Lloyd just died about, what, 6, 7 years ago?
Yep.
The first player, along with Sweetwater, to be able to play in the NBA has died in our lifetime. Why? Because they engineered the outcome to benefit their people. That's what white supremacy is. That's what Jim Crow is. That's what the legacy of inequity is. And let me say this. I teach at the well-known HBCU Vanderbilt. Okay, homeboy cutting up, or wherever I go, that's where a black college is. Here's the point. I teach my beautiful students, most of whom are not black. I teach a lot of white kids. Some of them are extremely brilliant. Some of them are smart. A lot of them are average, and some of them ain't got it at all. Mediocrity knows no race. So mediocre white people have been allowed from the history of this country's inception to prevail where talented others were denied. So it is exactly the outcomes that we seek to be able to articulate an idea of justice and fairness in this country. And people say, how long? I say, I tell you what, let's have the attempt to overcome the inequities as long as we had enslavement and call it a day. Now, we know that ain't happening. My point is simply this. Black people and other minoritized people don't look for a hand up and a handout. They're looking for opportunities to exercise their talent, but they're also looking for ways to remedy the historic legacy of inequity that has been imposed on us. And you crippled us. You got to find a way to make the leg better.